Honduras.
Honduras, officially the Republic of Honduras, is a republic in Central America. It was at times referred to as Spanish Honduras to differentiate it from British Honduras, which became the modern-day state of Belize. The country is bordered to the west by Guatemala, to the southwest by El Salvador, to the southeast by Nicaragua, to the south by the Pacific Ocean at the Gulf of Fonseca, and to the north by the Gulf of Honduras, a large inlet of the Caribbean Sea. Honduras was home to several important indigenous cultures, most notably the Maya. Much of the country was conquered by Spain, which introduced its now predominant language and many of its customs in the 16th century. It became independent in 1821 and has been a republic since the end of Spanish rule. The area of Honduras is about 112,492 kilometers (2), and the population exceeds 8 million. Its northern portions are part of the Western Caribbean zone. Honduras is most notable for production of minerals, coffee, tropical fruit, sugarcane, and recently for exporting clothing to the international market.
Etymology.
Higueras, a reference to the gourds that come from the jacaro tree, many of which were found floating in the waters off the northwest coast of Honduras. Honduras, literally depths in Spanish. Columbus is traditionally quoted as having written Gracias a Dios que hemos salido de esas Honduras, English, thank God we have come out of those depths, while along the northeastern coast. However, William Davidson notes that there is no form of this quotation in the primary documents of Columbus's voyage, and that it in fact comes from accounts over a century later. Honduras from Fondura, a Leonese language word meaning anchorage, which is one of the first words for the region to appear on a map in the second decade of the 16th century, applied to the Bay of Trujillo. It was not until the end of the 16th century that Honduras was used for the whole province. Prior to 1580, Honduras referred to the eastern part of the province, and Higueras referred to the western part. Another early name is Guamuras, revived as the name for the political dialogue in 2009 that took place in Honduras as opposed to Costa Rica.
History. Pre-colonial period.
In pre-Columbian times, modern Honduras was part of the Mesoamerican cultural area. In the west, the Maya civilization flourished for hundreds of years. The dominant state within Honduras's borders was that based in Copan. Copan fell with the other lowland centers during the conflagrations of the Terminal Classic, the early 9th century. The Maya of the civilization survive in western Honduras as the Kirti, isolated from their Chalchan linguistic peers to the west. Remains of other pre-Columbian cultures are found throughout the country. Archaeologists have studied sites such as Naco and La Sierra in the Naco Valley, Los Naranjos on Lake Ajoa, Yarmila in the Camayagua Valley, La Ceiba and Salatron Viejo, both now under the Cajon Dam Reservoir, Selen Farm and Cayamal in the Aguan Valley, Cerro Palang, Travicia, Carust, Taicamaya, Despalanco in the lower Olua River Valley, and many others.
Conquest period.
On his fourth and the final voyage to the New World in 1502, Christopher Columbus became the first European to visit the Bay Islands on the coast of Honduras. Columbus landed near the modern town of Trujillo, in the vicinity of the Gay Moreto Lagoon. In 1524 the Spanish arrived on Honduras led by Hernan Cortes, bringing forces down from Mexico. Much of the conquest was done in the following 2 decades, first by groups loyal to Cristobal the Olid, and then by those loyal to Francisco Montijo, but most particularly by those following Alvarado. In addition to Spanish resources, the conquerors relied heavily armed forces from Mexico, Tlaxcalans and Mexica armies of thousands who lived on in the region as garrisons. Resistance to conquest was led in particularly by Limpera, and many regions in the north never fell to the Spanish, notably the Mosquito Kingdom. After the Spanish conquest, Honduras became part of Spain's vast empire in the New World within the Kingdom of Guatemala. Trujillo and Gracias were the first city capitals. The Spanish ruled the region for approximately 3 centuries.
Colonial period.
Honduras was organized as a province of the Kingdom of Guatemala, and the capital was fixed, first at Trujillo on the Atlantic coast, and later at Camayagua, and finally at Tegucigalpa in the central part of the country. Silver mining was a key factor in the Spanish conquest and settlement of Honduras. Initially the mines were worked by local people through the encomenda system, but as disease and resistance made this less available, slaves from other parts of Central America were brought in, and following the end of the local slave trading period at the end of the 16th century, African slaves, mostly from Angola, were obtained. After about 1650, very few slaves or other outside workers arrived in Honduras. Although the Spanish conquered the southern or Pacific portion of Honduras fairly quickly, they were less successful in the northern or Atlantic side. They managed to found a few towns along the coast, at Puerto Caballos and Trujillo in particular, but failed to conquer the eastern portion of the region and many pockets of independent indigenous people as well. The Mosquito Kingdom, located in the northeast, was particularly effective in resisting conquest. The Mosquitoes, in turn, found support from northern European privateers, pirates, and especially the English colony of Jamaica, which placed much of it under their protection after 1740.
Independence in the 19th century.
Honduras became independent from Spain in 1821 and was for a time part of the First Mexican Empire until 1823, when it became part of the United Provinces of Central America Federation. After 1838 it was an independent republic and held regular elections. Comayagua was the capital of Honduras until 1880, when it was transferred to Tegucigalpa. In the decades of 1840 and 1850 Honduras participated in several failed attempts to restore Central American unity, such as the Confederation of Central America, 1842–1845, the Covenant of Guatemala, 1842, the Diet of Sonsonate, 1846, the Diet of Nicaragua, 1847, and national representation in Central America, 1849–1852. Although Honduras eventually adopted the name Republic of Honduras, the unionist ideal never waned, and Honduras was one of the Central American countries that pushed hardest for the policy of regional unity. Since independence, nearly 300 small internal rebellions and civil wars have occurred in the country, including some changes of government. Liberal policies favoring international trade and investment began in the 1870s, and soon foreign interests became involved, first in shipping, especially tropical fruit, most notably bananas, from the north coast, and then in railway building. In 1888, a projected railroad line from the Caribbean coast to the capital, Tegucigalpa, ran out of money when it reached San Pedro Sula, resulting in its growth into the nation's main industrial center and second largest city.
International influence in the 20th century.
In the late 19th century, United States-based infrastructure and fruit-growing companies were granted substantial land and exemptions to develop the northern regions. As a result, thousands of workers came to the north coast to work in the banana plantations and the other industries that grew up around the export industry. The banana exporting companies, dominated by Cayamo Fruit Company, until 1930, United Fruit Company, and Standard Fruit Company, built an enclave economy in northern Honduras, controlling infrastructure and creating self-sufficient, tax-exempt sectors that contributed relatively little to economic growth. In addition to drawing many Central American workers to the north, the fruit companies also encouraged immigration of workers from the English-speaking Caribbean, notably Jamaica and Belize, who introduced an African-descended, English-speaking and largely Protestant population into the country, though many left after changes in the immigration law in 1939. Following the attack on Pearl Harbor, Honduras joined the Allied Nations on December 8, 1941. Along with 25 other governments, Honduras signed the declaration by United Nations on January 1, 1942. Constitutional crisis in the 1940s led to reforms in the 1950s, and as a result of one such reform, workers were given permission to organize, which led to a general strike in 1954 that paralyzed the northern part of the country for more than 2 months, but which led to more general reforms. In 1969, Honduras and El Salvador fought what would become known as the Football War. There had been border tensions between the two countries after Oswaldo López Arellano, a former president of Honduras, blamed the deteriorating economy on the large number of immigrants from El Salvador. From that point on, The relationship between the two countries grew acrimonious and reached a low when El Salvador met Honduras for a 3-round football elimination match as a preliminary to the World Cup. Tensions escalated, and on July 14, 1969, the Salvadoran army launched an attack on the Honduras army. The Organization of American States negotiated a ceasefire, which took effect on July 20 and brought about a withdrawal of Salvadoran troops in early August. Contributing factors to the conflict were a boundary dispute and the presence of thousands of Salvadorans living in Honduras illegally. After the week-long football war, as many as 130,000 Salvadoran immigrants were expelled. El Salvador had agreed on a truce to settle the boundary issue, but Honduras later paid war damage costs for expelled refugees. Hurricane Fifi caused severe damage while skimming the northern coast of Honduras on 18 and 19 September 1974. Melgar Castro, 1975-78, and Paz Garcia, 1978-82, largely built the current physical infrastructure and telecommunications system of Honduras. In 1979, the country returned to civilian rule. A constituent assembly was popularly elected in April 1980 and general elections were held in November 1981. A new constitution was approved in 1982 and the PLH government of Roberto Suazo assumed power. Roberto Suazo won the elections with a promise to carry out an ambitious program of economic and social development in Honduras in order to tackle the country's recession. President Roberto Suazo Córdoba launched ambitious social and economic development projects, sponsored by American Development Aid. Honduras became host to the largest Peace Corps mission in the world, and non-governmental and international voluntary agencies proliferated. During the early 1980s, the United States established a continuing military presence in Honduras with the purpose of supporting the Contra guerrillas fighting the Nicaraguan government and also developed an airstrip and a modern port in Honduras. Though spared the bloody civil wars racking its neighbors, the Honduran army quietly waged a campaign against Marxist-Leninist militias such as Centronero's Popular Liberation Movement, notorious for kidnappings and bombings, and many non-militants. The operation included a CIA-backed campaign of extrajudicial killings by government-backed units, most notably Battalion 316. In 1998, Hurricane Mitch caused such massive and widespread destruction that former Honduran President Carlos Roberto Flores claimed that 50 years of progress in the country were reversed. Mitch obliterated about 70% of the crops and an estimated 70 to 80% of the transportation infrastructure, including nearly all bridges and secondary roads. Across the country, 33,000 houses were destroyed, an additional 50,000 damaged, 75,000 people killed, 12,000 injured, for a total loss estimated at $3 billion USD.
21st century.
The 2008 Honduran floods were severe and around half the country's roads were damaged or destroyed as a result. In 2009, a constitutional crisis culminated in a transfer of power from the president to the head of Congress. Countries all over the world, the OAS, and the UN formally and unanimously condemned the action as a coup d'état and refused to recognize the de facto government, though a document submitted to the United States Congress declared the coup to be legal according to the opinion of the lawyers consulted by the Library of Congress. In any event, the Honduran Supreme Court also ruled the proceedings to be legal. The government that followed the de facto government set up a Truth and Reconciliation Commission, Comisión de la Verdad y Reconciliación, which after more than a year of research and debate concluded the ousting to be a coup d'état to the executive power, illegal in their opinion.
Geography.
Honduras borders the Caribbean Sea on the north coast and the Pacific Ocean on the south through the Gulf of Fonseca. It mostly lies between latitudes 13 deg and 17 degn, a small area lies south of 13 deg, and the Swan Islands are north of 17 deg, and longitudes 83 deg and 90 degw. The climate varies from tropical in the lowlands to temperate in the mountains. The central and southern regions are relatively hotter and less humid than the northern coast. The Honduran territory consists mainly of mountains, but there are narrow plains along the coasts, a large undeveloped lowland jungle La Mosquito region in the northeast, and the heavily populated lowland Sula Valley in the northwest. In La Mosquito, lies the UNESCO World Heritage Site Rio Platano Biosphere Reserve, with the Coca River which divides the country from Nicaragua. The Islas de la Bahia and the Swan Islands, all off the north coast, are part of Honduras. Misteriosa Bank and Rosario Bank, 130 to 150 kilometers, 80 to 93 miles, north of the Swan Islands, fall within the EEZ of Honduras. Natural resources include timber, gold, silver, copper, lead, zinc, iron ore, antimony, coal, fish, shrimp, and hydropower.
Ecology.
The region is considered a biodiversity hotspot because of the numerous plant and animal species that can be found there. Like other countries in the region, Honduras contains vast biological resources. The country hosts more than 6,000 species of vascular plants, of which 630, described so far, are orchids. Around 250 reptiles and amphibians, more than 700 bird species, and 110 mammal species, half of them being bats. In the northeastern region of La Mosquitia lies the Rio Platano Biosphere Reserve, a lowland rainforest which is home to a great diversity of life. The reserve was added to the UNESCO World Heritage Sites list in 1982. Honduras has rainforests, cloud forests, which can rise up to nearly 3,000 meters above sea level, mangroves, savannas and mountain ranges with pine and oak trees, and the Mesoamerican Barrier Reef System. In the Bay Islands there are bottlenose dolphins, manta rays, parrotfish, schools of blue tang and whale shark.
Government and politics.
Honduras has 5 registered political parties: National Party, Partido Nacional de Honduras, PNH; Liberal Party, Partido Liberal de Honduras, PLH; Social Democrats, Partido Innovación y Unidad Social Democrata, PINUSD; Social Christians, Partido Democrático Cristiano de Honduras, DCH; and Democratic Unification, Partido Unificación Democrática, UD. PNH and PLH have ruled the country for decades. In the last years, Honduras has had 6 liberal presidents: Roberto Suazo Cordova, José Azcona del Hoyo, Carlos Roberto Reina, Carlos Roberto Flores, Manuel Zelaya and Roberto Micheletti, and 3 nationalists: Rafael Leonardo Callejas Romero, Ricardo Maduro and Porfirio Lobo Sosa. The elections have been full of controversies, including questions about whether Azcona was born in Spain, and whether Maduro should have been able to stand, given he was born in Panama. Honduras has had many leaders from several parties since gaining its independence from Spain and from Mexico. 19 have served as president during the period when Honduras was a part of the Federal Republic of Central America. 67 men have served as president of the Republic of Honduras. The current Honduras president is President Porfirio Lobo. In addition, there have been several joint governments. In 1963, a military coup was mounted against the democratically elected President Ramon Villeda Morales. This event started a string of military governments which held power almost uninterrupted until 1981 when Suazo Cordova, LPH, was elected president and Honduras changed from a military authoritarian regime. Government ministries are often incapable of carrying out their mandate due to budgetary constraints. In an interview with Rodolfo Pastor Fusquel, Minister of Sports and Culture and one of 3 super ministers responsible for coordinating the ministries related to public services, security and economic being the other 2, published in Honduras this week on July 31, 2006. It was related that 94% of the department budget was spent on bureaucracy and only 6% went to support activities and organizations covered by the mandate. Wages within that ministry were identified as the largest budget consumer. President Maduro's administration denationalized the telecommunications sector in a move to promote the rapid diffusion of these services to the Honduran population. As of November 2005, there were around 10 private sector telecommunications companies in the Honduran market, including 2 mobile phone companies. As of mid-2007, the issue of telecommunications continues to be very damaging to the current government. The country's main newspapers are La Prensa, El Heraldo, La Tribuna and Diario Tiempo. The official newspaper is La Gaceta. A presidential and general election was held on November 27, 2005. Manuel Zelaya of the Liberal Party of Honduras, Partido Liberal de Honduras, PLH, won, with Porfirio Pepe Lobo of the National Party of Honduras, Partido Nacional de Honduras, PNH, coming in second. The PNH challenged the election results, and Lobo Sosa did not concede until December 7. Towards the end of December, the government finally released the total ballot count, giving Zelaya the official victory. Zelaya was inaugurated as Honduras' new president on January 27, 2006. Zelaya precipitated a national crisis by trying to hold a non-binding national referendum to ask the Honduran people, do you agree that, during the general elections of November 2009 there should be a fourth ballot to decide whether to hold a constituent national assembly that will approve a new political constitution? This possible assembly then might not or more likely might have proposed constitutional changes to term limits, as the military and the Supreme Court deemed possible, and other more likely, unrelated and legal constitutional changes.
2009 Honduran constitutional crisis.
The 2009 Honduran constitutional crisis resulted in an event the international community almost universally refers to as a coup d'état. The coup lasted from June 28, 2009 to January 27, 2010. President Manuel Zelaya attempted to hold a non-binding referendum on June 28 asking voters if the upcoming November elections should include an additional ballot box. The ballot box would ask if the Honduran people wish to form a constitutional assembly in the term of the newly elected president. The Supreme Court upheld a lower court ruling that found a prior referendum based on the same issue unconstitutional and prohibited it.
Referendum.
Zelaya ignored the Supreme Court and decided to proceed on the referendum, basing his decision on the law of citizen participation, passed in 2006. Zelaya dismissed the head of the military command, General Romeo Vázquez Velázquez, for disobeying an order to hold the poll, but the Supreme Court ordered his reinstatement. The Supreme Court then ordered the military, who as a non-civilian force had no jurisdiction over the matter, to detain Zelaya. The vote on the referendum was scheduled for June 28, 2009. In the early morning on that day, the army arrested Zelaya at his home. Zelaya was held in a U.S. air base outside Tegucigalpa before being forcibly sent to San Jose, Costa Rica. Zelaya attempted re-entry into the country on several occasions. According to the Constitution, it is illegal to expatriate any Honduran citizen. Roberto Micheletti, the former president of the Honduran Congress and a member of the same party as Zelaya, was sworn in as president by the National Congress on the afternoon of Sunday 28 June for a term that ended on January 27, 2010. No country recognized the de facto government as legitimate. All members of the UN condemned the removal of Zelaya as a coup d'état. Some Republican Party members of the U.S. Congress voiced support at the time for the new government. On September 21, 2009, Zelaya returned to Honduras and entered the Brazilian embassy. From its roof, he attempted to incite his supporters in a rebellion. The government disrupted utility services to the embassy and imposed a curfew in an attempt to maintain order in the area when Zelaya supporters protested around the embassy. The following day, in Decree PCMMO 16-2009, the government suspended 5 constitutional rights: personal liberty, Article 69, freedom of expression, Article 72, freedom of movement, Article 81, habeas corpus, Article 84, and freedom of association and assembly. It closed a leftist radio and a television station. The decree suspending human rights was officially revoked on October 19, 2009 in La Gaceta.
2009 election.
The presidential election on November 29, 2009 was held under a tense state of political turmoil and ongoing coup. Porfirio Lobo Sosa of the National Party of Honduras defeated the candidate of the Liberal Party of Honduras, civil engineer Alvin Ernesto Santos Ordonez. Sosa was sworn into office as president in 2010, and declared his wish to bring order to the country and reapply for membership in the Organization of American States.
Crime and law enforcement.
According to the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime, Honduras has the highest rate of intentional homicide in the world, with 6,239 intentional homicides, or 82.1 per 100,000 of population in 2010. This is significantly higher than the rate in El Salvador, which at 66.0 per 100,000 in 2010, has the second highest rate of intentional homicide in the world.
Departments and municipalities.
Honduras is divided into 18 departments. The capital city is Tegucigalpa in the Central District within the Department of Francisco Morazan. Atlantida, Choluteca, Colon, Comayagua, Copan, Quartz, El Paraiso, Francisco Morazan, Gracias a Dios, Intibuca, Islas de la Bahia, La Paz, Lempira, Ocotepec, Alancho, Santa Barbara, Vail, Yoro.
Economy.
The economy has continued to grow slowly, but the distribution of wealth remains very polarized, with average wages remaining low. Economic growth in the last few years has averaged 7% a year, one of the highest rates in Latin America, but 50% of the population, approximately 3.7 million people, still remains below the poverty line. It is estimated that there are more than 1.2 million people who are unemployed, the rate of unemployment standing at 27.9%. According to the Human Development Index, Honduras is the sixth poorest least developed country in Latin America, after Haiti, Nicaragua, Guatemala, Guyana, and Bolivia. Honduras was declared one of the heavily indebted poor countries by the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund, and was made eligible for debt relief in 2005. The government operates both the electricity, E&E, and landline telephone services, Honduras, as E&E receives heavy subsidies for its chronic financial problems. Honduras, however, is no longer a monopoly, as the telecommunications sector was opened to private sector on December 25, 2005, as was required under the CAFTA. The price of petroleum is controlled, and the Congress often ratifies temporary price regulations for basic commodities. Gold, silver, lead and zinc are produced at mines owned by foreign companies. After years of decline against the US dollar, lempira recently stabilized at around 19 lempiras per dollar. In June 2008, the exchange rate between US dollar and lempira was approximately 1 to 18.85. In 2005, Honduras signed the CAFTA, the Free Trade Agreement with the United States. In December 2005, Puerto Cortes, the main seaport in Honduras, was included in the U.S. Container Security Initiative. On December 7, 2006, the U.S. Department of Homeland Security and the Department of Energy announced the first phase of the Secure Freight Initiative, an unprecedented effort to build upon existing port security measures by enhancing the U.S. government's authority to scan containers from overseas for nuclear and radiological materials to better assess the risk of inbound containers. The initial phase of Secure Freight involves the deployment of nuclear detection and other devices to 6 foreign ports: Port Qasim in Pakistan, Puerto Cortes in Honduras, Southampton in the United Kingdom, Port Salalah in Oman, Port of Singapore, and the Gammon Terminal at Port Busan in Korea. Since early 2007, containers from these ports have been scanned for radiation and other risk factors before they are allowed to depart for the United States. To enhance the economy, on September 4, 2012, Honduras government has signed a Memorandum of Understanding with a group of international investors to build a zone, city, with their own laws, tax system, judiciary and police, but the opponents tried to lodge a suit at the Supreme Court about it, state within a state.
Energy.
About half of the electricity sector in Honduras is privately owned. The remaining generation capacity is run by E&E, Empresa Nacional de Energía Eléctrica. Key challenges in this sector are how to finance investments in generation and transmission in the absence of either a financially healthy utility or of concessionary funds by external donors for these types of investments, how to rebalance tariffs, cut arrears and reduce commercial losses, including electricity theft, without fostering social unrest, and how to reconcile environmental concerns with the government's objective to build 2 new large dams and associated hydropower plants, How to improve access in rural areas.
Social conditions.
Over the centuries, the territory of Honduras has known a number of social systems, ranging from ancient forager groups through early complex societies to more elaborated ones, such as those of the Maya and Lenca. Spanish conquest built on these, and their traditions carried over into the post-independence period. Honduras' emergence in the late 19th century as a cash crop-producing exporter and then its limited industrialization through the maquiladora system have brought about the conditions of today. In 2012, the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime rated Honduras as the country with the highest per capita murder rate. See List of countries by intentional homicide rate.
Water supply and sanitation.
Water supply and sanitation in Honduras varies greatly from urban centers to rural villages. Larger population centers generally have modernized water treatment and distribution systems. However, water quality is often poor because of lack of proper maintenance and treatment. Rural areas generally have basic drinking water systems with limited capacity for water treatment. Many urban areas have sewer systems in place for the collection of wastewater, however proper treatment of wastewater is scarce. In rural areas, sanitary facilities are generally limited to latrines and basic septic pits. Water and sanitation services were historically provided by Servicio Autónomo de Alcantarillas y Acueductos, SANA. In 2003, a new water law was passed which called for the decentralization of water services. With the 2003 law, local communities have the right and responsibility to own, operate, and control their own drinking water and wastewater systems. Since passage of the new law, many communities have joined together to address water and sanitation issues on a regional basis. Many national and international non-government organizations have a history of working on water and sanitation projects in Honduras. International groups include, but are not limited to, the Red Cross, Water First, Rotary Club, Catholic Relief Services, Water for People, Ecologic Development Fund, CARE, CISO-SECO, Engineers Without Borders USA, Flood the Nations, SHH, Global Brigades, and Agua para el Pueblo in partnership with Agua Clara at Cornell University. In addition, many government organizations working on projects include the European Union, USAID, the Army Corps of Engineers, Cooperación Andalucia, the Government of Japan, and many others.
Transport.
Transportation in Honduras consists of the following infrastructure: 699 kilometers of railways, 13,603 kilometers of roadways, 7 ports and harbors, and 112 airports altogether, 12 paved, 100 unpaved. Responsibility for policy in the transport sector rests with the Ministry of Public Works, Transport and Housing, SAPRATRAVI after its Spanish acronym.
Demographics. Ethnicity.
According to the CIA World Factbook, Honduras has a population of 8,143,564 as at July 2011. The CIA World Factbook states that the population makeup is mestizo, mixed Amerindian and European, 90%, Amerindian 7%, Black 2%, White 1%.
Languages.
Spanish, Honduran Sign Language, Garifuna, Bay Islands Creole English, Mosquito, Sumu, Pek, Jikak, Kirti, Lenca, extinct.
Religion.
Although most Hondurans are nominally Roman Catholic, which would be considered the main religion, according to one report, membership in the Roman Catholic Church is declining while membership in Protestant churches is increasing. The International Religious Freedom Report, 2008, notes that a CID Gallup poll reported that 47% of the population identify themselves as Catholic, 36% as Evangelical Protestant, and 17% provided no answer or considered themselves other. Customary Catholic Church tallies and membership estimates 81% Catholic, while the priest, in more than 185 parishes, is required to fill out a pastoral account of the parish each year. The CIA Factbook has Honduras listed as 97% Catholic and 3% Protestant. Commenting on statistical variations everywhere, John Green of Pew Forum on Religion and Public Life notes that, it isn't that numbers are more right than numbers, but how one conceptualizes the group. Often people attend one church without giving up their home church. Many who attend evangelical megachurches in the U.S., for example, attend more than one church. The shifting and fluidity is common in Brazil, where 2/5 of those who were raised evangelical are no longer evangelical, and Catholics seem to shift in and out of various churches, often while still remaining Catholic. Most pollsters suggest an annual poll taken over a number of years would provide the best method of knowing religious demographics and variations in any single country. Still, in Honduras are thriving Anglican, Presbyterian, Methodist, Seventh-day Adventist, Lutheran, Latter-day Saint, Mormon, and Pentecostal churches. There are Protestant seminaries. The Catholic Church, still the only church that is recognized, is also thriving in the number of schools, hospitals, and pastoral institutions, including its own medical school, that it operates. Its Archbishop, Oscar Andres Rodriguez Maradiaga, is also very popular, both with the government, other churches, and in his own church. Practitioners of the Buddhist, Jewish, Islamic, Baha'i, Rastafari and indigenous denominations and religions exist.
Folklore.
Legends and fairy tales are paramount within Honduras culture. Lluvia de peces, fish rain, is an example of this. The legend of El Cadillo, La Llorona and La Seguinaba, La Susha, are also popular.
Geographic distribution.
According to the Honduras 2001 Census of Population, the most populous departments are Cortes, 1, 2 million, Francisco Morazan, 1, 2 million, Euro, 466,000, Alancho, 420,000, Choluteca, 391,000 and Comayagua, 353,000. The least populous are Islas de la Bahia and Gracias a Dios. According to the same source, the main cities are Tegucigalpa, 894,000 hab. Distrito Central only, San Pedro Sula, 517,000 hab. Coloma, 160,000 hab. La Ceiba, 140,000 hab. El Progreso, 106,000 hab. Choluteca, Comayagua, Puerto Cortes, La Lima and Danlí. However, the main metropolitan areas are Tegucigalpa, 1,200,000 hab. S 2007 and San Pedro Sula, 900,000 hab. Same year. Between the 1988 and 2001 census, San Pedro Sula doubled its population. The country has 20 cities above 20,000 inhabitants. Honduras is the only Central American country which its second most important city has half the population of the city capital. Considering metropolitan areas only, the Honduran capital is the third largest Central American urban agglomeration, after Guatemala City and San Salvador.
Diaspora.
Since 1975, immigration from Honduras has accelerated as job seekers and political refugees sought a better life elsewhere. Although many Hondurans have relatives in Spain, Mexico, Nicaragua, and Canada, the majority of expatriate Hondurans live in the United States. In Spain, the Honduran community is the largest amongst the Central American people living there, with an estimated 8,500, according to Spanish statistics for 2006. The main figures indicate that 2,130 live in Barcelona and 1,100 in Madrid. In addition, Catalonia had 4,854 Hondurans. Comunidad de Madrid, 1,086. Comunidad Valenciana, 556. And Castilla y León, 524. According to Chilead, Investigación Migración Internacional de Latinoamérica, as figures, by 1992, more than 8,700 Hondurans were living in El Salvador. 9,700 in Nicaragua, 1995, 5,500 in Guatemala, 2002, 3,000 in Costa Rica, by 2000, and 2,400 in Belize, 1990. Note: figures are not comparable. Additionally, According to UN Demographic Yearbook, 2000, 8,700 Honduran live in Canada. Recent State Department estimates suggest there are between 800,000 and 1 million Hondurans living in the United States, nearly 15% of the Honduran domestic population. The large uncertainty is due to the substantial number of undocumented Honduran immigrants currently believed to be residing in the United States. The 2010 U.S. Census counted 633,401 Hondurans in the United States, up from 217,569 in 2000.
Culture. Creative endeavors.
The most renowned Honduran painter is José Antonio Velázquez. Other important painters include Carlos Gary and Roque Zelaya. Some of Honduras' most notable writers are Lucila Camero de Medina, Froilán Tersos, Ramón Amaya Amador and Juan Pablo Suazo Uceda, Marco Antonio Rosa, Roberto Sosa, Eduardo Bear, Amanda Castro, Javier Abril Espinosa, Teofilo Trejo, and Roberto Quesada. Some of Honduras' notable musicians include Rafael Coelho Ramos, Lydia Handel, Victoriano Lopez, Guillermo Anderson, Victor Donner, Matilda Kwan, Moises Canelo, Julia Juan Francisco Carranza, Camila Rivera Guevara, Hector David, Javier Reyes, Norma Erazo, Sergio Suazo, Angel Rios, Jorge Mejia, Jorge Santos, Walterio Galdames and Fernando Rodales. Hondurans are often referred to as Catraco or Catraca, femme, in Spanish. The word was coined by Nicaraguans and derives from the last name of the Spanish Honduran general Florencio Zatrac, who, in 1857, led Honduran armed forces against an attempted invasion by North American adventurer William Walker. The nickname is considered complimentary, not derogatory. The main language is Spanish, spoken by 94% as first language. Minority languages are spoken by less than 4%. These are Amerindian languages such as Garifuna, Mosquito, and Pec. Honduras Sign Language, and English on the Bay Islands off the north coast. Honduras This Week is a weekly English-language newspaper that has been published for 17 years in Tegucigalpa. On the islands of Roatan, Utila and Guanaja, the Bay Islands Voice has been a source of monthly news since 2003. Honduran cuisine makes extensive use of coconut, in both sweet and savory foods, and even in soups. The Jose Francisco Sabe Theater in San Pedro Sula is home to the Circulo Teatral San Pedrano, theatrical circle of San Pedro Sula.
Sports.
Football is the most popular sport in Honduras. Information on all other Honduran sports-related articles are below. Football in Honduras. Honduran Football Federation, Honduras National Baseball Team, Honduras National Football Team, Honduras National Under-20 Football Team, Honduras U17 National Football Team.
Celebrations.
Some of Honduras' national holidays include Honduras Independence Day on September 15th and Children's Day or Dia del Niño, which is celebrated in homes, schools and churches on September 10th. On this day, children receive presents and have parties similar to Christmas or birthday celebrations. Some neighborhoods have piñatas on the street. Other holidays are Easter, Maundy Thursday, Good Friday, Day of the Soldier, October 3rd to celebrate the birth of Francisco Morazan, Christmas, El Dia del Emperor on July 20th, and New Year's Eve. Honduras Independence Day festivities start early in the morning with marching bands. Each band wears different colors and features cheerleaders. Fiesta Catraca takes place this same day. Typical Honduran foods such as beans, tamales, bolitas, cassava with chicharrón, and tortillas are offered. On Christmas Eve, the people reunite with their families and close friends to have dinner, then give out presents at midnight. In some cities fireworks are seen and heard at midnight. On New Year's Eve there is food and cohitas, fireworks and festivities. Birthdays are also great events, and include the famous piñata which is filled with candies and surprises for the children invited. La Feria Isidra is celebrated in La Ceiba, a city located in the north coast, in the second half of May to celebrate the day of the city's patron saint Saint Isidore. People from all over the world come for 1 week of festivities. Every night there is a little carnival, carnavalito, in a neighborhood. Finally, on Saturday there is a big parade with floats and displays with people from many countries. This celebration is also accompanied by the milk fair, where many Hondurans come to show off their farm products and animals.
National symbols.
The flag of Honduras is composed of 3 equal horizontal stripes, with the upper and lower ones being blue and representing the Pacific Ocean and Caribbean Sea. The central stripe is white. It contains 5 blue stars representing the 5 states of the Central American Union. The middle star represents Honduras, located in the center of the Central American Union. The coat of arms was established in 1945. It is an equilateral triangle. At the base is a volcano between 3 castles, over which is a rainbow and the sun shining. The triangle is placed on an area that symbolizes being bathed by both seas. Around all of this an oval containing in golden lettering, Republic of Honduras, free, sovereign and independent. The national anthem of Honduras is a result of a contest carried out in 1914 during the presidency of Manuel Bonilla. In the end, it was the poet Augusto C. Coelho that ended up writing the anthem, with the participation of German composer Carlos Hartling writing the music. The anthem was officially adopted on November 15, 1915, during the presidency of Alberto Membrano. The anthem is composed of a choir and 7 strunduran. The national flower is the famous orchid, Rinculalia digbyana, formerly known as Brassavola digbyana, which replaced the rose in 1969. The change of the national flower was carried out during the administration of General Oswaldo López Arellano, thinking that Brassavola digbyana is an indigenous plant of Honduras. Having this flower exceptional characteristics of beauty, vigor and distinction, as the decree dictates it. The national tree of Honduras was declared in 1928 to be simply the pine that appears symbolically in our coat of arms, El Pino que figura simbolicamente en nuestro escudo, even though pines comprise a genus and not a species, and even though legally there's no specification as for what kind of pine should appear in the coat of arms either. Because of its commonality in the country, the Pinus huicarpus species has become since then the species most strongly associated as the national tree, but legally it is not so. Another species associated as the national tree is the Pinus carabaya. The national mammal is the white-tailed deer, Autocoileus virginianus, which was adopted as a measure to avoid excessive depredation. It is one of 2 species of deer that live in Honduras. The national bird of Honduras is the scarlet macaw, Aramacao. This bird was much valued by the pre-Columbian civilizations of Honduras.
Health.
The fertility rate is approximately 3.7 per woman. The under 5 mortality rate is at 40 per 1,000 live births. The health expenditure was $PPP, 197 per person in 2004. There are about 57 physicians per 100,000 people.
Education.
In Honduras about 83.6% of the population of the country is literate. The net primary enrollment rate was 94% in 2004, while in 2007 the primary school completion rate was reported to be 40%. Honduras has bilingual, Spanish and English, and even trilingual, Spanish, English, German, Turkish, schools and numerous universities. The university is ruled by National Autonomous University of Honduras, which have centers in the most important cities in Honduras,